Welcome back. Today we're diving into a really thought-provoking article. The author makes this fascinating claim that our everyday human idea of God has drifted, well, worlds apart from a much deeper, more universal spiritual truth.
So let's just jump right into the deep end, shall we? What is God? It's probably one of the biggest questions ever asked. But the author we're looking at today says there's a major disconnect in how we even begin to answer it.
He basically says there are two ways to see it. On one side, you have the direct, unfiltered cosmic reality, the spiritual view. And on the other, you have the version we get down here on Earth, which gets kind of bent and reshaped by our very human, very limited senses.
Okay, so here's how we're going to trace the author's argument. We'll start with that big spiritual view, then see how it secretly lines up with the world's religions, and then we're going to pinpoint exactly where our human spin on things sends us off in a totally different direction.
So the author's whole idea kicks off with this. We're all born with this, an innate connection to something bigger, but the constant noise of our physical world, everything we see, hear, and touch, just buries it. That deep, cosmic truth gets lost in the static of our day-to-day lives.
Right, so if our world is all noise, what's the actual signal? What does that deeper spiritual understanding even look like? Well, the author points to communications from what he calls finer realms of existence. Apparently, in these realms, beings have a much clearer connection to what they just call the source.
Now, pay close attention to the words here. These definitions, which the author says come from these spiritual sources, are all about abstract principles and cosmic forces. We're talking about ultimate reality, absolute unity, not a person or some individual guy in the sky.
And this quote from a source he calls Ishkumar, man, it just nails it. It really drives home that core spiritual view. God isn't a who, it's a what. It's this all-encompassing energy, this unified whole where everything is connected.
So if that's the spiritual side of things, how does it stack up against the religions we actually see on Earth? This is where, for me, the author's argument gets really compelling. He says if you dig down to the absolute bedrock of our religions, their core ideas look surprisingly similar to that spiritual view.
So yeah, they have different names for it. God, Allah, Brahman, but the author highlights one huge thing they all have in common. At their heart, they're all monotheistic. Every single one is focused on one central source of everything.
And it gets even wilder when you dig a little deeper. The author finds that they all describe this central source with a nearly identical set of cosmic qualities. Look at these: creative, omnipresent, ultimate reality. These words could have come straight from that spiritual list we just saw. His point is that at the very, very bottom, the truth is the same.
So, if the foundations are so alike, where did it all go so differently? Where does this worlds apart idea come from?
Well, the author says it comes from us. It's just in our nature to embellish. In other words, we take these enormous, infinitely complex cosmic ideas and we try to shrink them down to our size. We make them feel familiar, personal, more human. It's just a natural way to try and wrap our heads around something that's totally beyond us.
And the author says this happens in a few steps. It starts with a simple, relatable idea like being made in God's image. Then, that cosmic source starts getting human emotions, like jealousy or forgiveness. And before you know it, we're building these really complex stories and doctrines all around these human-like ideas just to make it all feel more organized.
But here's the thing. According to the author, this isn't always just harmless storytelling. This embellishment can cross a line, a really dangerous one. He calls this falsification.
And that's what he calls falsification. It's that exact moment when belief gets twisted and used as a weapon. It's when our very human ideas about God are used to justify things like fear, hate, and division that are the complete and total opposite of what a unified, creative source would ever represent.
He gives some pretty powerful examples. The term God-fearing, he says, is a total contradiction. A perfect source should inspire awe, not terror. And the idea that a universal God would pick sides in our human wars, or that he'd prefer one religion over all the others, in the author's view, these are 100% human inventions that betray that core truth.
So, after all that, where does this leave us? The author brings his whole argument full circle, back to a single unifying message that, honestly, is pretty hopeful. In this quote, again from that source, Ishkumar, is really the big takeaway. The author's point is that underneath all the layers of stories and divisions and rules we've created, there's a simple, universal truth, and it's accessible to literally anyone.
on any path who just chooses a path of decency.
And so, the author leaves us with this final, really provocative question to chew on. If that deep spiritual truth and the core of our religions are basically the same, then what do all the differences, the divisions, and the conflicts that we've built around them, what do they really say, not about God, but about us?